Chaim, everyone.
Chaim.
Little Meir was walking to yeshiva. This was in Belarus, in the times when the communist government outlawed going to yeshiva, going to cheder. So he had to take a little bit of a roundabout route. He went to a little alleyway, and he went to a few different alleyways, little side streets, about a little over 100 years ago. And somewhere in Belarus.
Is that a real story?
It's a real story. And little Meir is sneaking around, and he comes to like a little alleyway, and he sees right in front of him 2 soldiers. And they're also in the little alleyway. They're the little alley behind the local bakery, and they're sticking their hands in to try to grab some bread that they, I guess, didn't want to wait in the bread line, or they wanted to get more than their quota. And they look up and they see this Jewish boy standing there and watching them, and they grab him and they say, "How dare you come here and interrupt the soldiers? Our very important mission. That's it. Your life is over." Right? They didn't want to. They were afraid he's going to go and report them. Right? They didn't want to get in trouble for taking bread. So
he knows that they're doing it? He's smart enough to realize that?
Yes, he's smart enough to realize that. He was old enough to realize that. And so they grab him and they put him against the wall and they say, "That's it. Say your last prayers." And little Meir turns to Hashem and he starts davening. He says, "Hashem, please help me." Right? Do a miracle, perform a miracle and save me. Now I know that I'm not worthy of Hashem doing a miracle for me, but I promise you, Hashem, if you save my life, I will dedicate my life to the study of your Torah. At that moment, they suddenly hear footsteps, and it seems like one of the commanding officers was coming by. The 2 soldiers disappeared before they were spotted, and Meir was free. And keep his promise yet. He just made a serious promise. So he told his parents that he's about this promise that he made, and he went off to the yeshiva in Slobodka, and he became known. He ended up starting the yeshiva that turned into later, it was moved to Eretz Yisrael, it became the Hebron yeshiva, and he became known as Reb Meir Chadash the Mashgiach in the Hebron yeshiva. So in this week's parsha, we have a very, very interesting verse, right? Moshe Rabbeinu was sent to the Jewish people to tell them that Hashem wants to take them out of Mitzrayim. So Moshe Rabbeinu turns to Hashem and he says, "Hashem, when I go to the Jews and I tell them Hashem sent me, they're going to ask me, what is his name? What is his name? What should I tell them? What should I tell them? What's Hashem's name?" It's an interesting question. So Hashem says, "You know what my name is? I will be as I will be." That's my name. I will be as I will be. No. Ehyeh asher ehyeh. And you should go to the Jewish people and tell them, "Ehyeh shlachani aleichem." I will be has sent me to free you from Egypt. Very strange verse. What type of answer is this, right? What's your name? Well, I will be as I will be. I am who I am. Right? I'll be as I will be. What type of answer is this? And there are many, probably hundreds of different explanations on this pasuk. Of course, the Rebbe's explanation is that Hashem was answering Moshe, that even when the Yidden are in Golus, I will be with them. I will be with them in this trouble and in all the future troubles. But today we're going to focus on a different explanation given by Rabbi Yaakov Yitzchak, the Yid HaKadosh of Pshischa, who has a very interesting approach to this pasuk. So in order to understand this, we'll start off with an interesting story. My children like this story. They have a tape at home all about the story, so they're going to make sure to correct all my mistakes. It's called Moshe's Tefillah Tree. So this story, the Slonim Rebbe once arrived in a small town in Poland, and wherever he traveled, he liked to visit different historical and holy sites along his trip. So when he came to the city, he asked the people, "Are there any maybe Kivrei Tzadikim around here that I can visit?" And they told him, "Well, we have a very interesting grave in our cemetery. Maybe you should come and take a look." So he said, "Okay, let me go and see." They come to the cemetery, and they see this gravestone, and it says, "Here is buried a student of Rab Chanina Bar Chachinoi." This Rabbi Chanina bar Hachinoi was a great sage, Talmudic sage. He was a friend, a colleague of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, who lived about 2,000 years ago. And here is this gravestone, probably 100, 200 years old, right? Which is a student of Rabbi Chanina bar Hachinoi. And no one in the town has any idea what this means, who this is. And, they tell we have a very strange gravestone here. So the Rebbe closes his eyes, and his face begins to turn red, and obviously they realize that he's going through some sort of elevation of his neshama. And after a while, the Rebbe opens up his eyes, and he says, I want you to gather all the people of the city. I'll tell you the story behind this gravestone. What's the story? What's the story of this gravestone? So, a few hundred years ago, there lived a young boy, a young orphan. His name was Moishele, right? Moishele, at a young age, his parents passed away. He didn't have anybody to look after him, and he was taken in by an uncle. Now, this uncle didn't have a family of his own, and when he took in this orphan, he took in little Moishele. He didn't take him in because he loved him so much and because he cared for him, but rather because he figured he could have somebody assist him in his work. He was a blacksmith, and he needed somebody to help out around the smith, around the shop, right? So this 5-year-old boy is running around this shop trying to work, and of course he says to his uncle, I want to go to school, I want to be with all my friends. His uncle says, absolutely not, you're here, you're helping me out, right? And his uncle gave him a lot of work. It was very difficult. He wanted to take a break. His uncle would make him get up early in the morning, work till late at night, and if he didn't, make his quota every day, he would get yelled at. Sometimes he would get beaten, and time went on. Time went on, and he was there for quite a few years, and he was starting to get older, and he realized he doesn't want to stay here anymore. This is not where he wants to be. This is not how he wants to spend his life, right? He asked his uncle if he could go to yeshiva, to cheder, to learn something, to get an education, but his uncle absolutely forbade it. Absolutely not. You're here to work, and you're going to spend your time working.
Did you know how to write?
What?
Did you know how to write?
I don't think so. I'm not sure. I don't think he knew how to read or write. Right? So one day, he's not feeling very good, and he decides that's it. He can't spend all of his day working, so he relaxes a little bit. At the end of the day, his uncle comes, and he didn't make the quota. His uncle gets ready to start, runs over to him, wants to grab him, and he runs away. He's already, 11, 12 years old now, so he runs away, and his uncle starts chasing him, and he runs out of town, and he runs to the woods right outside of the city. And his uncle's running after him, and he realizes he has to get away, so he finds a cluster of trees, and he climbs up one of the trees. And his uncle comes down to the bottom of the tree, and he's like, Moishele, you better get down here right away. If not, it's going to be serious. Right? I don't know what I'll do to you if you don't come down right now. And he looks up to the heaven, and he starts davening to Hashem. He says, Hashem, help me. Right? So I don't want to go back to my uncle. Right? Help me. Save me. And I might not be worthy, similar to what little Meir said. Right, I might not be worthy of a miracle, Hashem, but I promise you, Hashem, if you save me, if you save my life and you give me a normal life, I will dedicate my life to helping others. I'll dedicate my life to helping others, and specifically since I suffered as an orphan without anybody to care for me, I will dedicate my life to helping orphans. At that moment, his uncle is busy running around, and he's like, Moishele, I don't know where you are, that's it, I'm leaving. You want to stay here, don't ever come to my house again. And his uncle leaves, Baruch Hashem. He comes down from the tree, and he realizes, the first part of his prayer was answered, right? His uncle's gone, but now what's he going to do? He's stuck alone in the middle of the woods with no one to care for him, and he again turns to Hashem, and he says, Hashem, if you help me, if you get me a place to stay, you get me a life, you help me, get on my feet. As I promise you, Hashem, I will dedicate everything I have, everything I am, my whole existence will be to help others, especially to help orphans. And he starts walking, and he's running alone in the middle of the forest, doesn't even know where he's going. And that's when he bumps into Yankel, the diamond merchant, who sees this kid running alone in the middle of the forest. It's at night, And he says to him, what are you doing here? And Moshe starts telling him his story. And Yankel, who himself didn't have any children, says, Moshe, you can come to my house. I'll take you in. I'll take care of you. And Moshe now had a place to stay. He goes home with Yankel, and of course, the first thing he does, he wants to go now to yeshiva. He's already, 12 years old. He hasn't learned the word of Torah his whole life. So they send him to school, and all the other kids start laughing at him. Right? He's not. He tries to learn, but he's not very successful. And after a while, he realizes this is not really working out. So Yankel sees that he's having a difficult time. He says, "You can join me in the business. You can come in and work with me. Right? I'm not going to make you work very hard, banging on metal, but you can help me in my diamond business. It's a much easier job." And this Moshe is okay with, and he joins the business. And pretty soon, he's a few years went by, and he became a successful diamond dealer. And of course, he remembered his promise. And as soon as he began making money, all of his money that he earned was given away to tzedakah, to support widows and orphans. And Moshe became very successful. And he was now old enough to get married, and he's looking for a shidduch. He has a problem, right? It's very difficult for an orphan who has no family, has no yichus, no parents, to find a good shidduch. And not only that, he never studied Torah. He has money, but in those days, money wasn't as important as yichus. Right? Today, I think things changed a little bit. A little bit.
It turned around.
So he's looking for a shidduch. So he's looking for a shidduch, and he's having trouble. And he decides, he turns to Rabbi Yankel one day, and he says, I have to go pray. I have to leave the city, and I have to go pray to Hashem. Rabbi Yankel says, where are you going to pray? You're going to some Rebbe, some big tzaddik. He says, no, I'm going to a tree. Right? Tree? He says, yeah, last time Hashem answered me at a certain tree, I'm going to go back to that same tree where Hashem helped me the first time.
Good idea.
So,
reminds me of the story with the rock. the rock was the witness.
Yeah. So he travels out to the tree. He somehow was able to identify the tree. I guess it was very traumatic, his first experience there. He was able to remember it. And he comes to the tree and he says, Hashem, thank you so much for everything you've done for me until now. And, I've been able to help so many people. But please, Hashem, I want to move on to the next stage of my life. I want to start a family. I want to build a home. And Hashem, the home is not just going to be for me. I promise you, Hashem, that my home will be open to all the poor people, especially to orphans who need somewhere to stay, who need someone to look after them. And I will I will bring orphans into my home and treat them as if they were my own children. He turned around, he went back to his town, and a short while later, finds a shidduch.
Believe it or not.
Right? He finds a shidduch. Of course, the first date, he discusses with his colleague. He says, I made a promise to Hashem, our home is going to be open to poor people, and we're going to raise orphans in our home. Right? And his wife, his Kala Sarah, of course, agrees to it. She's happy to agree to this. And they get married. And, of course, their home became known throughout the city. And all the poor people knew that if they ever needed a meal, they come to Moshe's house. And they adopted 5 or 6 orphans, and they raised them in their home. A few years went by, and Moshe and Sarah were not blessed with children. And Moshe comes home one day, and his wife Sarah is crying, and she says, Baruch Hashem, we raised so many orphans in our home, but we don't have any children of our own. Moshe says, you're right, we got to do something about this. I'm going to daven. Where are you going to daven? Which Rebbe you're going to? I'm going to the tree. Right?
Grab a tree.
I'm going to the tree. So he goes back, he finds the same tree, and he says, Hashem, thank you so much for everything you've done for me so far. Please, Hashem, me and my wife have been married for 10 years. We don't have, that's not really an important detail of the story. So he says, we've married so many years, and we want children, and I know, Hashem, I promised you that I'm going to raise orphans in my home, and I've done so, and I want you to know, Hashem, that me having children is not going to detract from everything that I do for you, Yisrael. As a matter of fact, I promise you, Hashem, that when I have children, you won't see any difference between the way I treat my own children and the way I treat the orphans that I'm raising. That was his promise to Hashem. He goes home, Then a short while later, his wife becomes pregnant, and they give birth to a daughter named Hannah. And sure enough, Moshe did everything he could to make sure that even though he has now his own daughter, but he made sure that in his house it should not be noticeable any difference between his own daughters and the orphans that he's raising. Not only that, he went out, he tried to help more people. He found orphans that needed help, Chnasas Kala, to be married off, and he went out and he married many of them off, and he did everything he could to, every free moment that he had, he was busy helping people. Many years went by, right? His daughter Hannah grows up, and now it's time for her to get married. And now, of course, she wants to marry a Ben Torah, a Talmid Chacham. And Moshe starts looking for a shidduch for her, but again, there's a little bit of a problem, right? He himself didn't know how to learn at all, and he doesn't come from any important family, and it's a little difficult to find a Talmid Chacham who wants to, Talmid Chacham is looking for a shidduch with an important, prominent family, right? And he's having difficulties finding a shidduch, and again, he tells his wife, I'm going to go back, I get a bracha from the tree, right? I'm going to go daven by the tree. So, he goes back to the tree, and this time again, he says, Hashem, thank you so much for everything you've done for me until now. But Hashem, my daughter now needs to get married, and I know I've married off many orphans, but now it's time to marry my own daughter off. And I'm going to make sure that this wedding is not just going to be for me and my family. It's going to be a celebration for everybody. All the poor people in town are going to celebrate. All the orphans and widows in the city are going to celebrate this wedding. It's not just my own personal simcha. I promise you, Hashem, that it's going to be for everybody. I'm going to treat everybody as if all the orphans, as if they were my own children. This is his promise, right? He goes home, and he continues looking for a shidduch. He travels to a nearby town where there's a yeshiva over there, and he comes to the Rosh Yeshiva, and he says, I'm looking for a shidduch for my daughter, and unfortunately, I'm an orphan, and I never had a chance to learn, and it's a little bit difficult. Maybe you have a good shidduch for me. And the Yeshiva says, of course, I have a wonderful shidduch for you. There's a bacher in my yeshiva, his name is Chaim, and he himself is an orphan. Unfortunately, a few years ago, his city was overrun by a band of Kazakhs who wiped everybody out, lost his whole family, lost everything, and he came here all alone. He's been learning in yeshiva for the last 2 years. And go talk to him. I'm sure he'd love to do a shidduch with you. Moshe was so excited. He goes, he speaks to Chaim. Chaim agrees, and they set a date for the wedding. And Moshe decides that this wedding is, he made a promise to Hashem. It's not just for his own simcha, his own joy. This wedding is going to be for everybody. And he starts thinking, how is he going to make sure that the wedding is something that everybody can celebrate together? So he realizes, during the wedding itself, he might be so busy with his own, his daughter's wedding, he's not going to have time to worry about other people. So he decides that 3 days before the wedding, they're going to make a special pre-wedding feast. And they're going to make it specially for all the poor people of the city. And for all the orphans of the city who he raised and helped. And that's what he does. He makes a big party 3 days before the wedding. A feast to make sure the feast was even bigger than the wedding itself, right? And everybody comes, and Moshe is standing there at the wedding. He brings a big bag full of golden coins, and he's going around handing everybody money to make sure they're really happy, right? They have a good reason to be happy and rejoice at this event. And suddenly he notices a bit of a commotion in the other side of the mechitza. And he asks what's going on. And he's told that there's this orphan girl who is sitting there, Miriam, who's sitting by one of the tables, and she's crying. Okay, so call her to the side. I'll talk to her. And he says, Miriam. He looks at her. He sees her clothing is torn. She's, old torn clothing. He says, Miriam, I'm going to quickly. We're bringing some new, nice clothing for you. Here's some money, right? I'm sure you tell me what I can do to help you out. And Miriam's quiet. She doesn't want to talk. He says, Miriam, it's a special day. We're celebrating a special pre-wedding for my daughter. I want everybody to be happy. What can I do to make you happy? And she starts crying, and finally she tells him her story. Right? She was an orphan, and she lost her family, and her family was also attacked in one of the Cossack raids. And she tells him that she was actually engaged to be married. And the day of her wedding, the Cossacks came into her town and they killed everybody. And she was left alone. Her family was destroyed. Her whole life was destroyed. And she's been wandering around from one city to the other. Finally, she came here. And she shows up at this party, and guess who she sees? Her chassan, her groom. Right? Obviously, neither of them knew about each other.
He was like,
And
what's he gonna do now?
right? And she says, what am I supposed to do? And now Moshe is in a very, he has a big problem on his mind, right? On one hand, a big conundrum, right? On the one hand, his whole life, he's promised Hashem that his joy, every blessing that Hashem gives him will not be his own blessing, will be to make others happy, right? He's promised Hashem that he will treat orphans and raise them as if they were his own children. And now, he's at the happiest moment in his life, right? He's about to marry off his only daughter, and he's about to do it while stepping on the hopes and dreams of this poor orphan girl. And he sits down alone and he starts thinking, right? He realizes this is the test. This is the test of his life. And finally he makes the decision. He calls it his daughter, he calls it Chaim. And he comes out and after he gets their agreement, he comes out and he makes an announcement. Then in 3 days, everyone's invited to the Chaim's wedding. And there's a small change of plans. The bride is going to be a different bride, right? It's not going to be Hannah, it's going to be Miriam. Right? And that's what he does. And he makes sure, and at the wedding, he made sure it was the most beautiful wedding the town had ever seen. And Moshe himself was dancing at the wedding like nobody else danced. And after the wedding, he began looking for a shidduch for his daughter again, and Baruch Hashem, he found another, a Talmud Chacham. But of course, for him, he didn't just have one son-in-law, now he had two son-in-laws, right? He had two son-in-laws. And the two son-in-laws were always welcome in his home. They came to his Shabbos table, and they would sit at the table discussing, saying Divrei Torah, arguing and discussing different Gemaras that they were learning. And Moshe was sitting there at the table, and of course he's very happy, getting a lot of nachas from his two son-in-laws, but it was something that was bothering him the whole time. And one day he decides he's going back to the tree. Right? He goes back to the tree, he says, Hashem, there's nothing I could say to thank you for everything you've done for me. Right? You helped me so much throughout my life. And Baruch Hashem now, I have a beautiful family. I have two sons-in-law who are big Talmidei Chachamim, and they sit at my table learning Torah.
Two son-in-laws.
But Hashem, I sit there listening to them, and I can't join in the conversation. Hashem, there's one last thing I want to ask from you. I want you to allow me to allow me to learn Torah. I've tried in the past and it hasn't worked, and I want you to open up your Torah for me. And he says, Hashem, I'm telling you, this is not something I'm doing for my own honor, for my own glory. I'm doing it just so I should be able to connect to your Torah. And he comes home, and that night he suddenly sees this very distinguished-looking rabbi walking towards him. And he asks him, "Who are you?" He says, "I am Rabbi Chanina Bar Chachinoi." Rabbi Chanina Bar Chachinoi was a Tana. He was a colleague of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and he was known for his tremendous dedication to Torah learning. He wanted to go to yeshiva to learn, and it was very difficult. Yeshiva was far away, so he had a discussion with his wife, and his wife agreed that he should go to yeshiva and learn, leave his family alone for many years. That's what he did. He went off to yeshiva, Rabbi Akiva's yeshiva, and he learned there, just like Rabbi Akiva himself went, and he learned for different versions, either 12 or 13 years. After 12 or 13 years, he gets a letter from his wife. The letter says, your daughter needs to get married, and you got to get home. Right? And he's a little reluctant to leave the yeshiva. Right? He's a little reluctant to leave the yeshiva. So the next day, in the middle of the class, Rabbi Akiva gets up, and he says, if anybody has a daughter who they need to marry off, they should go home. Right? Okay, fine. So he leaves the yeshiva, he goes back to his town, and he comes to the town, and apparently it was just like Miami, there was a lot of construction going on in the town. And he comes to the city, and he doesn't recognize the streets. Right? The street, all the houses and buildings have been changed over the last 12 or 13 years, and he doesn't know how to get home. He's a little embarrassed to start asking for directions to his own house. Right? Where do I live? Right? So he decides to go to the edge of the city near the well, where everybody comes out to get water. And he sees the girls of the town are coming out to get water. and he starts listening to the conversation, and finally he hears one of the girls calling the other girl daughter of Chachinoi. I don't know what they call her, daughter, not granddaughter, but that's what the Medrash says, right? The daughter of Chachinoi. He realizes this is his daughter, so he goes home with her, and they come into the house. His wife's in the middle of baking, and suddenly she looks up.
Who's this guy?
She sees her husband, and she collapses on the floor and dies. So the Medrash says that he turns to Hashem and he says, "It's not right. My wife should die because I spent 13 years learning Torah, and I followed my teacher's instructions and came home, and this is what happened, right?" And at that moment, his wife was given life once again, and he got up and he was able to marry his daughter. And again, of course, he spent the rest of his life learning Torah. So this Rabbi Chanina bar Chachinoi says to Moshe, "I was chosen to come down and teach you Torah." And he spent the whole night learning. In the morning, he wakes up, and in the beginning he's a little disappointed. He realizes it was all a dream, but then he goes to pick up a Gemara, and he realizes he still remembers everything, right? And of course, he remembered his promise. This was not something he's doing for his own honor, so he didn't tell anybody. And he started sitting on his own and learning. One day, his two sons-in-law are busy, involved in a big Talmudic discussion, and Moshe was sitting there listening, getting a lot of now. This time he understands everything they're saying, and he gets so involved in the conversation. And suddenly he decides he calls out, "It's not what the Rash was saying. He said something different." And they look at him like, "What? What do you know? Since when do you know the Rashba?" Right? And he had to tell them the story, but he made them promise they shouldn't tell anybody anything as long as he's alive. But before he passed away, he told them to write on his gravestone that here is buried a student of Rabbi Chanina bar Chachinoi. So this is what the Slonim Rebbe explained to the people of the city. That's what's going on over there. So when Moshe was sitting in the tree the first time, right, he turns to Hashem, and he has he says, I don't have any merits to deserve this great miracle that you're going to do for me. But Hashem, if you help me now, I'm going to be able to accomplish so much. I'm going to be able to use this blessing that you give me to help other people. And in that merit, I want you to give me a blessing. And that's why Hashem listened to him. Right? And this is something that we all, in a way, have to do. There are times when we can call out to Hashem and say, "Hashem, we have a lot of mitzvahs. Help us out in the merit of our mitzvahs." Some people can do that. I can't do that. Maybe there are some people here who could. But even when we can, we can turn to Hashem and we can say, "You know what, Hashem? I don't deserve this bracha. But if you give me this bracha, I'm going to use it to help others. I'm going to use it to serve you and to be a better person." The Maggid of Mizrich once came into the Beis Medrash late at night, and he turned to all of his students who are sitting there learning, and he says, "I need you all to come here and join me in saying Tehillim." Okay, saying Tehillim for what? He says, "We're saying Tehillim to help out a Jew who needs help." Which Jew needs help? But what's going on over here? And he says, there's a Jew who wants to do tshuva, a Jew who wants to improve, but he finds himself in a very difficult situation. And he's not able to do it. But he made a promise to Hashem that if Hashem helps him out, he's going to live a better life. He's going to turn his life around. So we're going to sit there saying Tehillim for him. And so they did. They sat there for a few hours saying Tehillim, and finally, and afterwards, the Mizrach Maggid told them they can go. A few weeks later, one of the Mizrach Maggid students notices this guy who was from Mizrich, but they hadn't seen him in town for a few years, and he asks him, "What happened to you?" And he tells him, "Well, as you probably remember, I was never a big Torah learner or a mitzvah observer, and I kind of, I left to follow my own path. And I had some friends who were horse thieves. And that's what I did. I became a very successful horse thief."
What's a horse thief?
Well, I would travel around the road, and I would find it was a good, very expensive looking horse, and I would follow it back, figure out where it's located, and then I would break into the stable at night. I would steal the horse, and I would go to a distant city and sell it at a very low rate. And I was able to make a lot of money. I became a very successful horse thief. And I traveled around from one city to the other. And I was, I wanted to, I was trying to find some really good, expensive horses that I could set myself up for life. And finally, I noticed the Duke's horses were Duke's wagon was coming by. It had the most beautiful horses I had ever seen in my life. I decided this is gonna be the big one, right? This is gonna set me up for life, right? So I waited at night, and I figured out. I went behind the side of the house over there where they had the stables, and I managed to break in. I untied the horses. I had everything ready to go, and suddenly one of the servants of the Duke had walked by the stable. He heard noise and he saw something was going on inside, and he quickly alerted the guards. And I heard everybody outside running, and they're getting ready, and they surrounded the whole the stable. They surrounded the barn, and they gave me a warning: you better come out now with your hands up, or we're coming in. I knew that the punishment for horse thieves is not to be thrown into prison. I mean, if you steal the Duke's horses, it's a lot more serious, right? There's no fine, and there's no prison time for this. So I turned to Hashem, and I said, Hashem, I messed up, right? Help me. I know I don't deserve it, Hashem, but I promise you that if you save me now, I'll turn my life around. I will never steal another horse. I will never steal anything else. Please, Hashem, help me. Right? And then I was sitting there, and at that moment, I noticed in the corner of the barn, an old set of farm clothes, or I guess clothing that the horse riders use or whatever. So I picked it up, and I stuffed it with straw, and I put it on top of a horse. I tied it to the top of a horse, and then I opened up the stable door, and I hit the horse, and I went running out. And it was at night, so all the guards see the horse galloping out with what looked like a person sitting on top of it. So they all ran chasing after it, and I was able to go out through the back where nobody was looking. And
we're the nicest horse.
The story doesn't say that, but I assume based on his promise that he didn't take the horse. Right? It could be he took the horse to get away, and then he sent the horse back. I don't know. I'm not sure. That detail of the story has not been discussed. Right? And of course, the students of the Maggid realized that this was the night that the Mizutcha Maggid asked them to gather together and say Tehillim for a Jew who wants to improve, who wants to become better, but he needs Hashem to help him. Right? And this is really every one of us. We have times when we need Hashem's help. And of course, we know the way to do it. Right? We don't come to Hashem and say, Hashem, I deserve to be helped right now. Because we don't. Most of us don't. If you do, I guess you could do it. But even if you do, it's better not to. Right? Even Moshe Rabbeinu didn't ask Hashem to help me because I deserve it. Right? He said he wants a matnas chinam. He wants a gift from Hashem. And our approach in such a situation is we turn to Hashem and we say, Hashem, I'm not on the level that I deserve to be helped. But if you help me, I will work on becoming that person. I will work on achieving that level. And for Hashem, when a person makes such a resolution, it's as if he has already done it in Hashem's eyes. Right? Next Wednesday, I'm not going to be here next Wednesday to give a class. I'm going to be at a wedding in Toronto. And I was asked yesterday if I can be
next Wednesday, I'm going to be at a wedding in Philadelphia, actually.
Okay, wonderful.
Not for sure. I might be by Bristol instead.
Wonderful. So I was asked yesterday if I could be a witness, an aid for the Kiddushin. But there's a big problem, right? In order to be a kosher witness, you cannot be a sinner. A sinner is not a kosher witness. And I have a problem, right?
I'm a sinner.
Right? Not that I want to be a sinner, but it's none of us are perfect. And how can I or how can anybody be a witness? Right?
There's 4 people.
So what do you do? What do you do if somebody asks you to be an Eid Kiddushin? You have to spend before the wedding. You have to spend some time, and you have to do tshuva. You have to resolve in your mind never to sin again. That's the only way to be a kosher witness at a wedding.
That's funny.
Right?
I actually didn't know this, and in the past couple weddings I did, I just didn't even tell the people that I was calling them up as a witness.
That's what they have to know, and they have to do tshuva, right?
You did tshuva?
And
I don't remember if it was
I heard a story once that about Zalman Auerbach, who was once at a wedding, who called him Masada Kedushin, and they called up they called up a rich friend of the family, who I guess a sinner would be an understatement in this case, right? He was a proud sinner, I guess. No. He was not a relative. He was not related. He was a friend.
Can't be a relative.
He's not allowed to be a relative. He's a relative. You're not allowed to be a relative. That's a different problem. But he was a sinner. And Rosh Shlomo Zalman knew that going to this guy and telling me the tshuva is not going to work. Right? But on the other hand, you can't tell the guy not to call up this wealthy relative and tell him he can't do it. A wealthy friend, right? You can't tell him not to do it. He's going to embarrass the guy. So Shlomo Zalman goes over to this rich man, and he says, you're such a respectable, honorable person. It's such an honor to have you here at the wedding. But I see they gave you a simple job. They told you to be a witness, just to watch the Kiddushin. And they gave me this really important job, to be the Masada Kiddushin, to be the one overseeing the whole wedding. I was wondering maybe if you could switch jobs. If you can take my job, and I'll be the witness. Right? Now, it happens to be that Masada Kiddushin is not, I mean, obviously, you have to have somebody there to know that they're doing the halachas correctly, but he has no halachic status. The fact that you're Masada Kedushin doesn't change the wedding. If you don't have Masada Kedushin, it's still a kosher wedding, right? But if you don't have a kosher witness, what?
It's almost like
an MC, basically. I mean, you have to have somebody who knows the halachas, but as long as they, if something goes wrong, or if they have a question, they need somebody there. But if they do everything right, then whether or not they have Masada Kedushin is irrelevant. So they gave this rich friend the honor of being the Masada Kiddushin, and Shlomo Zalman was the witness for the wedding. So so I mean, that's, obviously, in life there are some jobs that everybody considers important, but they're not really important, right? And then there are jobs that we don't consider important that really make or break things. So the reason why I'm bringing this down is not to point out that I have a very important job, but to point out that when a person resolves in his mind that he's going to change, Hashem treats it as if he already changed.
What happens if he doesn't change?
So that's his problem. He has to worry about that later. But at the time, well, it depends. If it wasn't a sincere resolution, then it doesn't mean anything. But if he made a sincere resolution and he made a promise and he intended to keep it, then even if later he doesn't keep it, it doesn't change the fact what already happened. And this says the Yid HaKadosh of Shishcha is what Hashem is answering Moshe Rabbeinu. And this is really what Moshe Rabbeinu's questions. Hashem sends Moshe to free the Jewish people. And Moshe says, they'll ask me, what is your name? What type of question is that? What is your name? Says the Yid HaKadosh, what does a name mean? If I'm sitting here and talking to you, I don't need to say your name usually. Right? I'm sitting here, I'm talking to you face to face. When you're far away from me in a big crowd and I'm trying to call out to you and get your attention, that's when I need your name. And this is what the Yidden are telling Moshe Rabbeinu. They're saying we're so far away from Hashem. How can we connect with Him? How can we be worthy of Hashem helping us? What name can we use? How can we call out to Hashem? Get His attention and get Him to help us out in this situation. What is Hashem's name? How can we, who are so far away from Hashem, deserve to be helped by Hashem? And this is what Hashem answers. Ehyeh asher ehyeh. My name is I will be. If you want to connect to me, you have to resolve in your mind, I will be different. I will change. Right now, I don't deserve Hashem's help. But I will be a person who does deserve Hashem's help. If Hashem helps me, I will change. I will be different. And that's what Hashem tells Moshe, you tell the Jewish people, why are you going out of Egypt? You're going out of Egypt so you can go straight to Mount Sinai. And you could become servants of Hashem. And Hashem says, Ehyeh asher ehyeh. If you say I will be, that's what I will be. In Hashem's mind, it's as if you already did it. And that's what allows you to connect to Hashem. And the next passage continues, Ehyeh shlachani aleichem. This resolution of I will be different. That's what causes Moshe Rabbeinu to come down to Mitzrayim and free the Jewish people. The fact that the Jewish people made a promise and made a resolution that we're going to go straight out of Egypt. We're going to go straight to our Sinai and become servants of Hashem. And this is what every one of us has to realize. And just to conclude the final story, in the year 1680, Rabbi Yeshua, either Falk or Polak, I'm not sure exactly how it's pronounced, was born in the city of Krakow. He was a grandson he was a grandson and named after Rabbi Yeshua Heschel Charif, the author of the Maginei Shleima, who wrote a book answering all of Tosfos' challenges on Rashi. And Rabbi Yeshua, from a young age, Rabbi Yeshua thought from a young age, was known as a bright Talmid Chacham. He got smicha from the Chacham Tzvi, or Tzvi Ashkenazi, and he got married to Leah, the daughter of Reb Shlomo Segal Landau from Lemberg, Lvov. And he was appointed to oversee the Melamdim in the city of Lvov. In those days, they didn't have schools. They had like private teachers who would teach children, but they had somebody who would oversee like all the teachers in the city, and that was his job that he was given. On the 3rd of Kislev, in the year Tuf Samach Gimel, year 1702, a terrible tragedy occurred. Right outside of the Jewish quarter of the city was a large military warehouse which held a large supply of gunpowder, and apparently a fire broke out there, and there was a tremendous explosion.
Like Iran today?
And a big section of the Jewish community, of the homes and the buildings in the Jewish community were, blown down by the thing. A large fire started. Rabbi Yeshua lost his whole family in that explosion, and he himself found himself under 3 floors of rubble. Right? He tried calling out, but there was no one to hear him. He tried to move, he couldn't move, and he couldn't. And after a while, a few hours passed by, and he couldn't feel his arms and legs anymore, and he couldn't move, and he realized that it was pretty much over. And at that point, he turns to Hashem and he says, Hashem, I know that the only way to get out of here the only way to get out of here is an open miracle. And I don't deserve an open miracle. But if you perform a miracle for me, I promise you, Hashem, that I will dedicate the rest of my life to studying your Torah in great depth. I will spend every free moment that I have studying your Torah. At that moment, there was suddenly the whole building began to shake, and a path opened up in front of him. Right? He went out, and he remembered his promise, of course, and he began studying. He studied. There were in that explosion, 36 people were killed in that explosion, and according to the Rachmendel of Kotsk, the Kotsk Rebbe says that he before he began writing his commentary, he studied the entire Talmud in depth 36 times, and then he began writing his famous commentary, the Pnei Yeshua, which is studied today in every yeshiva around the world, and he was known for the rest of his life for his tremendous dedication. Even in the stories are told that in the cold Lemberg winters, he would be sitting in the yeshiva even though there was no heating over there, and like the students, there were days when the students nobody came to yeshiva because it was so cold, and finally somebody showed up in the yeshiva and they found him sitting with like icicles hanging from his beard. Right, but he kept his promise, and he spent the rest of his life studying Torah, and that's how he became the Pnei Yeshua, whose works are studied by all students in every yeshiva around the world. So we all have to realize that there are times when we all find ourselves under the rubble. We all find ourselves in trouble. We all find ourselves in a difficult situation, whether it's financially, whether it's health-wise, whether it's socially with our families, and we turn to Hashem and we say, Hashem, help us. We don't deserve it. But we can turn to Hashem, and Hashem tells us what is His name. How do we call out to Him? His name is Ehiyah, I will be. If every one of us, we turn to Hashem and we say, Hashem, I need your help, and I will be different. I will change. I will use your blessings to improve, to make myself better, help others around me. And then Hashem says, Asher Ehiyah, I will consider as if you've already done it, and I will send Moshe to free you from whatever situation you find yourself in. L'chaim, l'chaim.
L'chaim.